So just as Dr. Kenneth said, my name is Abdul Hamid, and I am a medical doctor. Anyways, I already completed my medical school, and I also work as an AI product engineer as intern. So basically, this evening I'll just be running us through prompt engineering in healthcare. And the way I've made the discussion to be today is going to be in two folds. So for one, because I believe that in medics in tech, because I'm a very familiar face within the the community, I believe that we have two groups of individuals within the community. So we have those with very core engineering background who are intending to apply their skills within the healthcare space. And then we also have a group of individuals who have like core healthcare background and are looking to leverage on some AI tools or some AI skills to be able to actually do something meaningful within the health tech space. And I think that for the two groups of individuals, this is a session that you would really enjoy because of the numerous benefits that prompt engineering has to offer within the healthcare space. Working with what is prompt engineering, why is prompt engineering super important in healthcare, then to also talk about the components of prompt engineering, and then to talk about the best practices in prompt engineering. And finally, we end it with what are the differences between prompt engineering and context engineering. So by way of definition, prompt engineering is the art and science, and this is why prompt engineering, goes beyond the tech space, goes beyond being a software developer, or goes beyond being an AI engineer. Because when you look at the definition of prompt engineering, you would realize that it is an art. And because it is an art, everybody must learn the art of prompt engineering. Because one of the reasons is that these days people are increasingly interested in healthcare. People are increasingly interested in using AI for healthcare. And one of the commonest usage of AI within the healthcare space now are large language models, which everybody just open their ChatGPT and ask a question, right? But not everyone is actually utilizing the ChatGPT the way it's expected to be utilized, right? And that is why prompt engineering therefore becomes very important for us as a skill that we must know how to use, regardless of whether we are we have a tech background or not. And so the idea is effective input. And again, if you look at this definition carefully, you will realize that there are no technical terms there. This is just showing you how prompt engineering in and of itself is a task that requires, just normal English for you to be able to make effective communication. Right. So it is a science and art of crafting effective input to guide an AI model, which is usually a large language model. And there are plethora of examples, but the commonest one that all of us would really flow with is ChatGPT. All right. So imagine you using a ChatGPT. It is going to enable you to have a desired output. So the prompt engineering pipeline is very simple. You have an input, which is what you as the user you have typed into ChatGPT. You have the second one, which is the LLM, that is whatever is happening within the LLM. And then you have the third one, which is the output. So I was talking about the components of an effective prompt. And I said, when we look at it from the engineering perspective, because towards the end of this discussion, I'm going to show us a brief code, which I just wrote a script to show you the difference between a comprehensive and effective prompt and just a normal prompt for those who are actually like really building solutions involving the use of an LLM. So when you look at when you're thinking of a prompt as an engineer, and then you want to use it to build solutions, there are 6 important things that must be, that you must think of. The first one is the role. That is, which role do you want to give that LLM? Because when we look at LLMs, for example, LLMs, they have it's a large language model, meaning that it has a myriad of information in it, right? But for a particular task, you don't need all of those information, right? You need just some subset of that information. And so it's very important for you to be able to tell the LLM which role is it going to play. So for instance, if you are building, a conversational chatbot to help doctors in the hospital, right? So the role would be something like, oh, you are a doctor assistant. So it makes the LLM work as a doctor assistant, such that when we see maybe a terminology that has the same, a similar terminology that is used maybe within the healthcare, and that same similar terminology is also used within the legal space. Because we've already given it a role that is a doctor's assistant, it recognizes that whatever he's listening to is most likely within the healthcare space and not legal terminology, even though both terms are the same thing. So this is why it's important for you to assign a role to your LLM. For instance, you might need to build an LLM or to build a chatbot or an agent that can help you to sort out your dishes, right? So you can tell it that, oh, you are my kitchen assistant for today, and then you would help me to do this, and this. So that statement that you wrote initially, which is you are my kitchen assistant, refers to as the role that you have given to that particular prompt, that particular LLM. And so when you give a role to an LLM, it makes it different from an individual who's just using the LLM point blank. The second one is the task, right? So when you say, just as the example I've given, so you're my kitchen assistant, that refers to as a role. Then the task is, what you would do is that you would help me to sort out the most important spices that would be needed to prepare my food. That is a specific task that I have given an LLM. And that is why when we look at within the medical space, we would look at models that are more medical inclined rather than general performing models. And this is one of the basis of comparing models, right? So when you see a lot of papers these days, they would say, oh, Claude performs better at reasoning, or ChatGPT performs better at reasoning, but Claude is able to do efficient tasks, right? So these are metrics that they use to determine which LLM performs well. So one of the very recent LLMs that are really doing well within the healthcare space is that of Google. Right? So Measurement is a very wonderful model that was built recently by the guys at Google. There's also another LLM referred to as Mediton, which is also a very good and comprehensive LLM. Now, once that is done, then the next thing is the inputs. So the input refers to the text that individual is actually sending into the code. Why the output refers to what the LLM is generating, right? And then you would give specific outputs formats for a prompt. And this is one of the reasons why prompt engineering is super important, because once it gives you two different outputs. When you do some prompt engineering, right, you are able to get some structured outputs. So the output is just structured, meaning that for as long as you ask the same question, you would always get the similar output. And this is one of the reasons why prompt engineering is super important compared to other forms of engineering. Then the next one is constraints. So constraints simply means that you want to prevent your LLM from giving you an information that is not needed, right? So you tell it that, oh, you should not do certain things. For instance, we have an LLM that we are trying to prompt engineer to serve as a physician assistant. We don't want it to be a physician, but we want it to be a physician assistant. So as a constraint, we put it that, oh, you should do this, and not do this. So that's part of the constraint. And then the capabilities means that, oh, we are giving it some external information, telling it that, okay, for this particular task, you have access to a database. For this particular task, you have access to some documents which you can pick information from. So generally, these are the components of an effective prompt. Now, on the right-hand side, when we look at it from the clinical perspective, this is what we look at when we are building an effective prompt for any healthcare process. The first one is the clinical context, which is super important. We are building, when you want to use an LLM within the clinical context, then it's super important for you to be able to provide the LLM with the clinical context. Note, I said clinical context, I didn't say clinical information, right? So there are some informations that you don't necessarily have to give your LLM. For example, you should not give your LLM the name of your patient, right? So don't say because you want to use ChatGPT and then put in the name of your patient, put in the age of your patient, put in everything that can eventually enable an individual to trace that kind of person back, right? So in those kind of situation, we call those things personal health information. We call them PHIs. And so for every time you want to use an LLM within the clinical setting, you must ensure to sanitize your prompts from PHIs, right? So you shouldn't include the patient's name. You should not include the patient's address. Very important. However, you can include the patient's age. So you can say patient AA is a 25-year-old who presented to the hospital today with fever, headache, and rashes. So that is the patient details and the history. So that gives your LLM a clinical context with which it works with. And then a little bit above that is beyond giving the LLM, clinical context, you then also have to give it your desired task, meaning that after you must have given the context and say, oh, this is patient AA, he's 25-year-old. I want you to be able to, determine what are the commonest differential diagnoses in this particular patient who has presented with so and so. So I'm very sorry, my network is really, really terrible. So I really hope that you're able to follow. So the task is you are telling the LLM what exactly you want the LLM to do for you, right? So you've given it the name of the patient's clinical information. They are telling him generate 5 differential diagnoses for me. That is the task. And then the outputs format, as I said when I was explaining the outputs for engineering, core engineering, it's also important for you to also tell the LLM the outputs format that you want it to be. So is it in a SOAP format, which is subjective, objective, action, and plan, right? Or is it in an H&P structure? So this, when we talk about prompting, very, very importantly, you must define the output of your LLM. You must define your output of your LLM. If not, you would not be able to predict the functionality and how your LLM is going to react. So you must always tell your LLM that this is what I want you to output for me. Most times when we are coding, we always tell it, you must output it in a structured JSON format. Because if you don't, allow your LLM to output in a structured JSON format, then it becomes difficult for you to be able to use it in the future for other tasks, for other downstream tasks. So output format, super important. And then the last one is the guardrails. So this guardrails is the same thing as constraints. So you're telling the LLM what the extent of what it should do and what it should not do. So now moving on to best practices in prompt engineering, and this is for everybody, those who are engineers and those who are not engineers. Everybody needs to understand what are the best practices within prompt engineering, because that's only what can actually give you the best of responses. So the first one is that you have to be specific, and then I made a lot of examples that I've added. If you look at this example, this is a very broad example. I said, tell me about respiratory diseases. So what I was interested in looking at was to check about pneumonia. I just want to learn more about pneumonia, but I was not specific enough, right? And then if you look at the response that ChatGPT gave me, it told me respiratory disease, blah, blah, blah. And then started with major types of respiratory disease. I was telling me about upper respiratory tract infection. And what I needed essentially was to actually, learn about pneumonia, right? So one of the best practices of using large language models, using LLMs, is that you must be specific. You must identify what you want. Initially, you can say, okay, tell me about respiratory diseases to give you broad ideas. But as you are moving, like as you continue to chat with it, you must then become very specific. That's the only way you can get a specific answer. So now this is another example also. So the first one was tell me about respiratory diseases, and you can see all the information that I brought out to me. Now look at the second example. Second example, I now went a little bit more specific to say what are the common causes of pneumonia. Now he understands that I'm not just talking about respiratory diseases alone, but I'm talking about pneumonia specifically. And when you see the response, you will see that the response he's giving me is directed towards pneumonia, telling me that, oh, pneumonia is this, and begins to tell me the infectious causes of pneumonia. So an individual who has said, tell me about respiratory diseases, and another person who has said, what are the common causes of pneumonia? I mean, you will already understand that specificity enables us to get a better, output when it comes to large language models. So that's like the first and most important best practice. Now, the second practice is you have to describe your setting and provide the context. And I think a lot of people, especially within the healthcare space, people don't take their time to describe their setting. You understand? And that is why people would say, oh, LLM does not work in the healthcare space. I beg to differ. When I see some of my lecturers say, oh, ChatGPT is not knowledgeable, ChatGPT is this, I just laugh and say, these guys don't know what prompt engineering is. They will say, oh, they asked ChatGPT one question, it was telling them a wrong question. ChatGPT of today, 5.0 of today, is super, super intelligent. I can assure you that anywhere, anytime. GPT-5, super, super intelligent. I mean, this is papers that they've released and we can see it. But one of the reasons why people don't get to use, some of these things, especially within the healthcare space, is that we don't use them the way we are supposed to use them. And that's why this prompt engineering, super important. You can't just give LLM a barrage of information and expect it to do what you want it to do for you. So this number 2 is super important for all of us within the healthcare space that are going to be using, LLMs. You have to describe your setting. I mean, there's 1,000,001 things that can be happening, but you are seeing a patient in Nigeria, in Lagos State. You have to tell your LLM to say, oh, for instance, now, when, let me give you an example. If I give you an example and say a patient comes in with headache, fever, and maybe abdominal pain, or let's remove abdominal pain, headache and fever. In Nigeria, I'll most likely think of malaria first, because that's the commonest thing that we look at, right? But if I tell somebody maybe in the US that they hardly see a case of malaria, and I say a patient is coming with headache and fever of 40 degrees, the first thing they think about is a viral hemorrhagic fever, right? So you can see the same presenting complaints, different context, depending on location, right? And LLM does not know that you're in Nigeria. It doesn't know that you're in the US. So you are the one that have to describe your setting to it and provide the context. Now, look at this example. This same pneumonia that I'm talking about, I then asked the ChatGPT, I said, what are the commonest causes of pneumonia in Nigeria? And I told it, be specific. Now, I've done 2 things. Number 1, I've told you to be specific. And number 2, I have also contextualized my pneumonia, that I'm not interested in any other thing, but I'm interested in what are the commonest causes of pneumonia in Nigeria. And you can see the output now. You can see that the output is totally different. If you look at the output here, it was just giving me generalized information or infectious causes. But now, it's now, contextualizing it to Nigeria to say, oh, and it's even giving me studies in those states, so, and so, strep pneumonia in North Central Nigeria. You can see how by just changing the prompt, we have not done anything special. We've only added some information to the prompt that made it more specific and more contextualized. And you can see that we are getting a very beautiful output with our ChatGPT. So forget about anything that anybody's saying ChatGPT is not good. That's nonsense. When you hear people say that, you just know that they don't know about prompt engineering. Now look at another example again. All of these things are things I just typed to ChatGPT. So you can also copy the prompt and type it. Now I gave it another context. Look at this context, very important. I'm a medical student preparing for defense examination. So I've given it a setting. It already knows that 1, I'm in medical school. So it knows the kind of information that I would most likely need in a medical school. 2, I'm giving it the context that I want to defend my examination. So it knows what are the key points to give me. And 3, it knows that I'm in a university in Nigeria, right? And I told it, what are the commonest causes of pneumonia? If you realize, the same question I've been asking since. Here, I asked what are the commonest causes of pneumonia. It's told me that in Ondo State, it is what? It is strep pneumonia. Now, when I said I'm a medical student, it didn't really go and start telling me story about in Ondo State, in Kwara State, because it knows that I want to defend the exam. So it tells me that in children, especially under 5, the only place where you would hear them talk about, stratifying patients under 5, pediatrics, adults, only in the medical school. I mean, only in the hospitals. So by just telling the prompts that I'm a medical student, he understands that, oh, I'm not just going to generally tell him the causes of pneumonia, but I'm going to tell him that, oh, there's pneumonia based on age group, and as you can see, there's pneumonia based on age group, there's based on immune status, there's based on whether it's community or hospital acquired. So this is because we are engineering our prompts, we are getting different responses, and this is why, like, everybody on this call has to understand why context, really matters when it comes to healthcare. Now, the third one is, so we've talked about being specific. We've talked about, contextualizing when we are, doing prompting. Then the third one would be experimenting with different types of prompts, right? So there are so many ways you can ask a question. I mean, some of the examples before now, we've seen that we've asked the same question. The same question is what? I want to know the causes of pneumonia. However, we have been prompting it with different styles. So you can prompt either with a direct question, you can prompt with a list, you can prompt with asking it to enumerate, you can prompt it with asking it to just define a concept for you, and you can prompt by asking it WH questions. And then I want you to look at this example that I'm also showing to you. On the left-hand side, I'm sorry this is a little bit skewed. So I was trying to fit in two images on a particular slide. On the left-hand side, I prompted it and said, tell me about presidency in Nigeria since 1960. And my idea is that I wanted to know all the presidents, from 1960 to date. And then I said, tell me about presidency in Nigeria. And you can see, so it started with First Republic, telling me about the government type. I mean, I'm not really interested in all of those information. I just want to know who are the presidents from 1960 till date. Now look at the right-hand side. I said, I used a WH question, right? I said, who are the presidents of Nigeria since 1960? And then ChatGPT was, it was intelligent enough to help me to put it in a table format. So at a glance, I can see the name of the president or the head of state. I can see the period used in the office. I can see the type of government, and I can see the remarks. I mean, this is the same information that the left-hand side was also trying to show me. But for the left-hand side, I would most likely have to read like 5-7 pages because it started telling me about things that are not important. So you can see that just difference in prompts, the same idea, the same concept, difference in prompts, and then difference in answers. Now let's look at a medical example. So we are still under types of different prompting style. So I told the ChatGPT that tell me about treatment of LLM. So I just said tell me about treatment of LLM, and you can see treatment of malaria rather. So it says treatment of malaria, general principles. I mean, I'm already working as a doctor, so I already know what malaria is. I know what is causing malaria. Maybe I just forgot about the treatment, and I said, tell me about the treatment of malaria, and I can see what is bringing out. So a doctor will most likely be irritated with this. I say, what's this now? I'm asking you to tell me. Now look at the next slide. I asked it a question. I just changed, tell me the treatment for malaria. I changed it to a WH question, which is what is the treatment for malaria? Immediately, it gave me a different response. Now it's now telling me that, oh, it's what we call uncomplicated malaria and severe malaria. And immediately it's telling me that, oh, for uncomplicated malaria, we make use of what? Artemisinin-based combination therapy. I mean, there's really nothing I did. The only thing I just did is to change the prompt from tell me about the treatment of malaria to what is the treatment for malaria. So, I mean, it's very important for us to actually understand like how prompting engineering works, because when we have all of this, background information in our head, it gives us a better opportunity to be able to prompt very well. So, and all of these things are token expensive, especially when we look at the engineering side of things. A lot of these things are token expensive, right? So you don't necessarily have to be wasting tokens when you can easily just do a very good prompt engineering. So you can see that on the case of malaria alone, the only difference is tell me about. We changed tell me about to what is, and you can see that we got our answer very fast with what is, rather than, so these are different prompting styles that you have to also look into. Now the fourth best practice. So we've talked about being specific, we've talked about contextualizing, we've talked about exploring different prompting styles. Now the fourth one is you want to identify what is the overall goal of your prompts, right? So are you prompting because you want to get some ideas? So maybe you want to travel out of the country, or you want to travel for a vacation, right? So you ask an LLM where are the best places to to travel for vacation, right? So you need to understand your goal. But if you are working as a doctor, you are working as a medical lab scientist or a physiologist, and you need the services of the LLM, so you need to be able to tell the LLM that my goal is that we want to get these patients treated. My goal is that we want to get this particular lab result. So it's confusing. We want to get it sorted out. So you must be able to tell your LLM what is the overall goal of your prompts, right? Now, the next best practices is asking the LLM to role play. And I mean, I've already discussed this earlier on, so I'm not going to really talk about that one. That's why you have to just know the component of a prompt. You have to give it a role for you to get very good results, right? Now, I'm telling you that you should act as a pulmonologist. So a pulmonologist, these are people that treat respiratory conditions. Amongst them is pneumonia, right? So I said act as a pulmonologist and explain in clear terms what pneumonia is. Now, if you look at the context of, the semantics of this outfit, you realize that the way it is responding to me is a little bit advanced. This is not something that a 5-year-old would read and understand.
because he already believes that as a pulmonologist, you have some level of medical education. You mean not almost some level, you have a very high level of medical education, right? And so we are talking about alveoli. I mean, a 5-year-old would not read this and understand it, right? Because we have given it a role play. We can similarly then change the role play and say, oh, act as a teacher to a 5-year-old student and explain in clear terms what pneumonia is. And then you will begin to tell us about balloons, how when you put air inside balloons, that refers to air in the lungs, and begin to give you. So when you ask your LLM to role play, and I think this is very important for a lot of us who are also students here, you can tell the LLM to explain to something to you, maybe like as a 5-year-old student, and then you would be able to break down the concept very clearly. So the sixth step is to iterate and refine. So when you get a response, you can also ask it another response to be sure that you are getting the most out of it. Then the seventh one is you actually have to use previous traits. And these are one of the problems that a lot of people make when they are making use of ChatGPT or any other large language model. But I'm using ChatGPT as our model example. So for all of us who are familiar with ChatGPT, we know how ChatGPT works, that when you ask it a question, it automatically creates a thread for you by the left-hand side. So by the left-hand side, you see a lot of threads, like tabs that are open. So the only way you can effectively get to use your ChatGPT well is to dedicate each discussion per tab, each discussion per thread. So you open the particular thread, you were talking about, say, pneumonia, right? Let that thread be for pneumonia. If you want to ask about your travel destination, then it's better for you to open another thread and continue like that. Because again, although this is a little bit outside the scope of this, but there's something we refer to as context window. So when you have for all of these, our LLMs, they have what we call context window. So you cannot bombard the context window of an LLM with too much information. If not, it leads to what we call context distraction, right? And with context distraction, there's context confusion, and there's a lot of problem. So that's why you begin to say, I asked it a question, is referring back to what we discussed yesterday. This is because it's still making use of the information in that thread while they are trying to override that information. So it's one of the best practices of using, prompt engineering, or one of the best practices under prompt engineering, is to dedicate specific tabs to specific discussion. You're the same person that wants to go to grad school. You open a tab for, trying to get your application. You're the same person that is also working on how to code. You open a separate tab. So, very, very important for you. This is actually a very, very important point. Then number 8 is usually to ask open-ended questions, right? So for example, now, you want to treat pneumonia and you're looking at which drug is the best, right? So a closed question would be, is amoxicillin good for a patient with pneumonia? By closing this question now, you've already, restricted the LLM to only looking at amoxicillin. So the most likely output to tell you that, oh, amoxicillin is good or amoxicillin is bad, that's all. But when you open it and say, oh, what nature of antibiotics provides the best efficacy with less side effects in treating pneumonia? Now it's able to then tell you that, oh, so we have the bactericidal and we have the bacteriostatic, and then, oh, this is good, this is pricely, this is very cost effective, this is that, and then you're able to now. So after you ask your initial open-ended question, you can now begin to ask close-ended question. But ideally, it's usually very good for you to, ask an open-ended question that is relating to a particular task. Okay, so now I think I must have missed a slide there. I have 2 more. Okay, I'm very sorry. I think I missed a slide there. Okay, so the next outline I was going to talk about is just to talk about ethical considerations and guardrails, especially when we're looking at it within the healthcare space. So again, it's also important for you to understand that when you're using these LLMs, you're not using LLMs as a means to an end, right? The LLM is the alpha and omega. We're using it because we want to use it to augment, medical knowledge. We don't want to augment our practice within the healthcare space. So these are 4 important things that you must look at when you want to actually make use of an LLM within the healthcare space. And this is super important because whatever decision we make, it directly or indirectly affects the life of a patient. And because of that, you must be very careful. So the first thing, which is that you must always verify the outputs. You cannot, and that is why we say it is very unlikely that AI is going to take away the job of doctors. The doctors or the healthcare practitioners that AI is going to take their jobs are healthcare practitioners that fail to imbibe the use of AI, right? So the first thing that you must always verify the output of your LLM, no matter how much you must have, put a lot of guardrails, put a lot of constraints. A human being has to be in the loop that verifies that, oh, what this guy is saying is actually correct. So you must always review AI recommendations. We must never build a pipeline that allows an AI recommendation to just go like that without a manual review of it, especially when we're looking at, very high level, clinical procedures. Now, the second one is to acknowledge the limits of an LLM. And I think that was in the slide that got missing. So is that you don't ask LLMs questions that you don't know. For instance, I had a slide that was supposed to show, so I prompted the ChatGPT to tell me what is the latest, paper that was published on pneumonia today. I mean, you can't expect the LLM to be able to know what has happened today within the field of medicine, right? So you must acknowledge the limits of LLM. So you can't just be asking all questions and they expect it to give you an answer, because there are certain things that the LLM, can just not do, right? Because of the knowledge base. And the third one is that data protection. I've said this earlier. Anytime we talk about, LLMs within medicine, because in the next couple of years, people that are going into medical law, they would be the ones, getting a lot of money, because people are using LLMs and they are passing in patient information to their LLMs. And in the next few years, the patients will come back and come and sue you. Right. So as somebody who is within the healthcare space and is interested in actually making use of LLMs to work, we must ensure that personal health information, PHIs, are not fed to the LLMs. They don't need it. I mean, you should not put the name of the patient or the address of the patient, or something that would directly link back to the patient. So that is very important for us to know. And then the last one is the documentation standard. No matter how much we are making use of LLMs, we must ensure that we follow, the legal requirements, right? What is expected under the law, what is expected to be preserved under the law must be preserved. Whether you are using it as a human being or you are passing it to an LLM, whatever has to be preserved as an information has to be preserved, not to a third party. So finally, I wanted to talk a little bit about prompt engineering and context engineering. And this is a little bit advanced, but for those of us who are really interested in like the coding and the engineering aspect of things, so there's a lot of discussion that is moving now from prompt engineering to context engineering, right? So in prompt engineering, what you just simply do is that you have your prompt and then you have the user message. So the prompt is what all of the things we've discussed, all of those 6 components. These are the things that you cannot see. They are in the back end of the LLM. So when you put your own user message gets appended with the system prompt, and that system prompt together with your user message, everything then goes to the LLM, and then the LLM works on it, and then it gives you an output. That is the way prompt engineering works, right? But because now a lot of things are happening, people are beginning to interact with the LLM so much to the point that the LLM is not getting confused. So for instance, now last week you told the LLM that you are traveling to Lagos State, right? And then today you're already in maybe Kwara State, and then you're asking the LLM where are the good restaurants to eat. And then the LLM thinks that you're actually staying in Lagos State and then recommends maybe like some restaurants for you within Lagos. And you say, oh, I'm now in Kwara State. So it changes. And then that happens like 4 or 5 times. So within the message history or the memory of the LLM for you is already like in 5 places. In Lagos, in Kaduna, in Aba, in so many places. Then this can lead to context confusion, right? It can overwhelm the context window. So how do we ensure that some of this information are kept safe? That is what context engineering is, right? So we have context pruning, context quarantining, context summarization, and things like that. So it's very important for us. We can always read about it just to give you an idea about this. And so I was going to ask a question finally to cap the conversation, is that, and I really want all of us to just respond to this in the chat, that in this era of LLM, and when people are vibe coding, there's a lot of AI copilot tools that people are using to vibe code. Is there still needs to learn how to write code? Do you think that people still need to learn how to write code? So I would really love you guys, for those that are still available, can just just respond on the chat box. That do you think that it is important for people to still learn how to write code? Or we can just go to ChatGPT, tell it to write code for us, copy the code, go and paste it, and it works. Or we just have a copilot that we can just prompt, and then it's just going to write a code, and then we make use of it like that. So if I can prompt, if I've learned how to do prompt engineering very well, why do I have to learn how to code when there's an AI that can code for me? So I really want us to, look at some of these things. I don't know if there's still time. I would like to share another, just a code to just show us how prompting works. Dr. Ken, do I still have like
Yes,
5
go
minutes?
ahead. And the question you asked, are you expecting the participants to answer them right now, live on the chat?
I mean, for those that can answer live on the chat, that would be good.
Or you want them to
so,
unmute?
but the idea is that
you want them to unmute?
Maybe they should not unmute. Maybe they should
put the answers on the chat.
Yes,
okay,
yes.
Maybe you can then read it from there and be all right. So go ahead with you are sharing. You wanted to share something. Go ahead, please.
Yes. Can you see my screen? Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can see your screen, but it's showing the active meeting. You can now navigate to the tab you want to share.
Okay, sorry. I wanted to share my entire screen.
Okay, it was showing the entire screen before.
Can you see this?
Yes.
Okay, very good. So for those who are like interested in, we've said a lot of things. I just wanted to show you how some of these things work. So I wrote a very, very, very basic script, and that basic script is just to show us the difference between a normal prompting for those of us who are actually engineers and really want to build with an LLM, right? So when we look at prompt engineering, as I said, there are two things that happens when you send a message to ChatGPT. The message that you send to ChatGPT is called a user message. And that user message goes in, it gets appended with a prompt that is already in the back end of the ChatGPT. Those two then merges together and goes to the LLM, right? So that's exactly what happens here also. Now, so we have two functions here. We have this function called the basic prompt, right? So for this basic prompts, there's nothing there. The only thing is you're only going to take in the user question and then you send it to the LLM. So there's no prompting, there's nothing here. So the only thing that happens here is that when the user sends in a message, the message comes here and then goes to GPT. So we are currently using OpenAI. But then if you look at this engineered prompt, this is another function, and then you can see that all of the components of the LLMs, they are well outlined. So you can see the role. So I'm telling you that you are a knowledgeable healthcare assistant with expertise in general medical information and wellness advice. That is the role. What is the task? So I'm telling the LLM that it should answer all the health-related questions that anybody is going to ask. And this is most likely, this is the way majority of the general LLMs work, like ChatGPT and things like that. So the task is usually answer anybody's question. So this input, this is where the user message comes in. So if I type in that, what is the treatment for malaria? That question that I've asked comes in as the input, right? And then the next one is the output. As I said, one of the things that makes you a very good engineer is that when you're using your prompt engineer, you must always dictate your output so that if anybody asks a question yesterday and comes to ask that same question today, you would have the same response because your output is structured. In more advanced code, as I said, this is a basic code. In more advanced code, we usually say it to give us a structured JSON format. And so when we have a structured JSON format, we can be very sure that whatever we ask yesterday that gave us one answer is going to give us that same answer tomorrow. And this is very important for healthcare. I keep repeating healthcare because that's the majority of all of us here. For instance, imagine you a patient comes to maybe you build an LLM, and then you ask, a patient comes and asks, oh, what's the treatment for malaria? And then the LLM goes to say, oh, buy artemether lumefantrine, right? And then another patient comes in tomorrow and asks, what's the treatment for malaria? And they are telling the person to buy ORS. We are telling patients to buy metronidazole, right? This is because you have not structured the output, right? So it gives room for the LLM to be able to generate some other questions, right? So for the outputs here, we are telling the LLM three things. One, we are telling the LLM that it should give direct answer to the question, right? So that's what that ChatGPT does and start telling you that, oh, thank you for asking me this question. I'm glad to help you. All of those things, we don't need them, right? So in the output, we are telling the LLM that, see, you must just give a direct answer to the question. Don't give us any story. Two, you must give a brief explanation of the context that has been asked. And three, you must give relevant precaution. So you can see how we have now made our own mini LLM to be different from the mainstream ChatGPT now, because all of these things is not part of what is currently obtainable in the mainstream LLM. And then these are the constraints. So we are telling the LLM, because it's a medical doctor assistant, we are telling it, do not provide any medical diagnosis, do not replace any medical advice, do this, do this, do this. So these are the constraints. And then we are giving it capabilities that these are the things that you can do, these are the things that you can do. And then we are giving it reminders that patient safety is paramount, accuracy over speculations, right? So this is some of the things that prevent, in addition to other things like temperature and all of those things that prevent LLMs from hallucinating. These are some of the things that you can also do with LLMs. And then include your disclaimer. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. So so we are using GPT 3.5, and then so we just want to quickly test this out. So I wrote a basic so I'm just trying to test it out and see. I want us to compare the outputs of both of them. So which question can we ask now?
So in essence, this is how medical chatbots are built.
Exactly.
All right. So that's important for the participants to know that that's exactly what you're explaining right now. So this aspect is actually how the medical chatbots that we have in some of these, what do you call them, in some of these startups, how they build their chatbots and keep it there for you to interact with. So they are making it specific for healthcare. And once you give them the question, this is what happens at the back end. This is the code that is actually taking, making their chatbot specific to whatever they are actually about. So let's say that it's for pregnant women. So they specify it is mainly for pregnant women. Let's say that it's for childcare. So they specify everything and make it specific. So it won't give you the general answer a ChatGPT, interaction will give you. This is what the back end of the chatbot look like. All right, go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah. So I just wanted us to look at some of these things. So we say, what do I abstain from as a 40-week-old pregnant woman? So this is a question that we just asked. And so you can see, so what happens in the back end is that this question that I have asked, it comes in as what? It comes in as the input here. So it enters here as the input here, this question, and then gets appended with the prompt, and then it's sent to the LLM. And so the LLM gives you an output, right? So these basic prompts, so this is the prompts that we didn't, we didn't do anything to, we just use normal ChatGPT. And so you say, as a 40-week-old woman, it's important to abstain from alcohol, smoking, illegal drugs, this. So it gives you a very long information. You can see this is actually very, very long. This is actually very long. But when you look at our engineered prompt, as we've told it, part of the constraint we give to it that it must not be more than 150 words. You can see max 150 words. So, and we told it to just use simple, accessible language. And then we told it to always recommend healthcare professionals, right? And so look at the output from the engineered prompt. So you can see, as a 40-week-old woman, it's important to abstain from alcohol, smoking, recreational, all the information that this one said, and wasted a lot of our token.
Abdulhameed, I can't hear you again. I can no longer hear you, Dere.
Check up. There was absolutely nothing about regular checkup. The only answer he gave was that, oh, abstain from this, but even that, oh, regular prenatal checkups and communication with the healthcare provider is crucial, you know, this, and this, and then it's able to do that. So basically, I just wanted to show you, you know, how a pre-prompted LLM works as different to your ChatGPT and things like that. So because a lot of people will say, and when we build solution, people will ask that how is it different from ChatGPT? This is one of the reasons why it's different from ChatGPT. So I hope you guys learned something. I think we've spent far more than Dr. Ken.
Amazing, amazing. Like, so much value. And I can already foresee that in the future, maybe next year, we are going to run a challenge, you know, for people to build their own chatbots, and maybe, who knows, you know, this is just opening up possibilities of what is to come. So thank you so much. Yeah, one of these days, there will be a challenge for people to build this in this community, and the best to be selected and rewarded. So I just see possibilities from, you know, your presentation, and it was, despite the fact that you had quite a small, let me tell you guys, prompt engineering is like a course that you can take, say, over a period of 5 days to almost 2 weeks. However, he has been able to condense all the important aspects of it in just less than 1 hour. I think he deserves an applause. Thank you so much, Dere. And I know there are people who have comments, who have questions. So please, your hands can go up. Then I'll call you to, you know, make your comments, or to thank him, or to ask questions before he now summarizes. So I see Olasupo Mowani Nola. Sorry, I pronounced that your name that way, but you can go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for the presentation. So I just wanted to ask about using these LLMs to now create prompts based on like everything you've said. Like what's the like how do we use, like, is it advisable to use ChatGPT and like Gemini or
So you are breaking up. Moa, you are breaking up.
okay, the network is bad. So my question, let me just quickly say it again, was like, is it, or can we use these LLMs, AIs, to like create prompts to, like, what's the, yeah, can we use them to create prompts? Did you get that?
So can you prompt an LLM for your personal use, for medical use, for research, for education? Is that your question? Is it advisable to do that?
No, not that. Like, can we use these LLMs to
To
create
a
prompts, to
prompt?
do prompt engineering? Yes.
So Abdulhamid, do you have an answer to that? It's a bit confusing.
Yeah, I get a point. I mean, this is something that we've seen it happen a lot of times. With the advent of, you know, a lot of vibe coding, people actually use LLMs to create prompts, and it is very, very good. Using LLMs to create prompts are actually very good. But the only thing is that you must just, when the prompt must have been created, you also look at it and be sure that what you are communicating, because now, look at just for an example, now you're trying to communicate something, and then some of us don't understand, some of us do understand, right? So when you are communicating with your LLM, you must explain to it in the, you know, in the most simplest method ever, in terms of using it to create your prompts. But yes, if it is to create prompts, yes. And I think that, to me, ChatGPT is really, really good, right? When you use ChatGPT to create your prompts, you see that they do amazingly well, right? But the most important thing is that you have to be able to explain what you need to the ChatGPT, and then it's going to be able to, create these prompts, do some of these things for you. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. So let me call upon another person whose hand is up. So I have David Omoya Joe. Please go ahead.
All right, thank you, sir. Good evening, to Abdul Hamid. Um, I just wanted to ask a question on something I noticed. The prompts that you said gave better outcomes, they were read off sentiments, things like tell me about, things like what about. It was straight to the point, right? And it gave formal um outcomes. But if you are trying to compose something that is maybe creative or artistic, would you also suggest going with less sentiment or try to input some sort of emotions to the kind of prompt you are giving the LLM, whether it's ChatGPT in this scenario?
Abdulhamid?
Yeah. So that's a very wonderful question. And I think that at the core crux of everything, right, when we look at those best practices, again, we'll realize that they are not specific to a particular domain, right? So part of the best practice, which I mentioned, was that you need to understand the context with which you want your LLM to work, right? Now, one of it is that if you want your LLM to be creative, there are questions, there are ways by which you prompt, right? So for instance, now you want to build, maybe you have a mixture of colors, you want to build something artistic, right? It won't make sense for you to say, oh, list some of the things I can do this, I can make with this color, right? That's not going to enable the LLM to work in its full capabilities. And that's why part of the best practice also I talked about asking open-ended questions, right? So for this kind of situation that you've just mentioned, now it would make more sense for you to ask open-ended questions and allow the LLM to even tell you what it's thinking. Then part of the ones that you have thought about, then you go there, pick them, and then ask, simple questions. Again, part of the best practice is that you try with different prompting style, right? So there's no one answer fits it all. It's about you understanding what is the use case, right? And that's where the human brain comes in. Even though it's the LLM that help you to generate everything, but you as an individual needs to be able to think about what is the output, what do I want to gain from it. And again, this is also part of the best practices that you want to define what is your goal with using this LLM. So I think with all of this, you should be able to figure out what is the best. But to answer your question directly, yes, you should use an open-ended question, for things like artistic, things that have like some form of creativity in it.
Thank you very much, sir. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. You're welcome.
So thank you. We just have a few minutes left. James Tendo, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Abdulhameed, for the presentation. Mine, I think I saw some safeguards in the output, some regulations through which the answer is supposed to be formatted. I'm just inquiring, is there a way to safeguard the chatbot or the LM from which it's bringing the answer from to stay within the confines of the question? For example, if it's an eye clinic and it's an optometrist, is there a way to prevent it from asking questions about maybe pregnancy in an eye clinic chatbot?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, this is what majority, just like Dr. Ken said, this is what majority of companies do these days. A lot of companies these days, they also want to have a chatbot that can help them, speak to their clients. Some people, for some of the companies that I've worked for, we have chatbots that, we are using to speak to patients when patients are at home. So we send chats to them. So we have a chatbot that is monitoring their medications. People who are pregnant, you have chatbot that is monitoring their trimester. For some finance people, they have chatbot that are calling people to check up on them, why they've not registered, or why they've not what's it called now, why they've not deposited an amount in a period of time. So once you understand the concept of prompt engineering very well, you would be able to safeguard your LLM from doing more than what you expect it to do. So for instance, now we have an eye clinic. All you need to do is to be able to prompt it appropriately using those 6 components as I mentioned. Those ones, they would be able to effectively curtail. So we have the guardrails, we have the capabilities, all of those things. If you're able to do them effectively, it's very unlikely that that your LLM would do beyond that. But even if it's going to do beyond that, there are also some additional metrics that you can also employ to be able to solve those kind of problems. So yeah, with prompt engineering, you should be able to achieve that.
Okay, thank you.
So Abdul Hamid is speaking to those who want to build as well as speaking to those who just want to use. And prompt engineering goes beyond you like interacting with it for clinical use. It's also used in research. Like prompt engineering can be used for you to do your research like from beginning to the end. Prompt engineering can help you to actually analyze any data the way you want to analyze it, even without you lifting a finger. Prompt engineering can do so much, and understanding the best way to use it is actually a very, very important skill. So thank you, Abdul Hamid. I think we just have one more question. We are going to take one more question and we are going to end. And that's from John Chidozie. Please go ahead.
Good evening. Thank you very much for the opportunity to ask my question. And I want to say a big thank you to the speaker. I'm presuming Dr. Abdul Hamid. Sorry, I came in late. And every other one that must have spoken. I have one question. I've listened to what you've spoken about prompt engineering. Funny enough, before I started hearing about prompt engineering, I was already kind of like tweaking my prompts. I use AI to write and do some other things, but I tweak my prompts in such a way that it will give me what I want. So I think that has been prompt engineering. And most of what you said, the WH question and all those things, I unknowingly use them. But my question is, I try to, whenever I'm writing, I try to consider probably some area of bias. And even in the write-up, I will like give space, enter. I'll address some bias issues just before I press enter. I address some bias. Do not consider this from this perspective. Do not consider this from this perspective. But still yet, after I get my results from the prompt, when I go online and search for that thing, it's usually not too far from what I was given, but I still realize that bias are not clearly, what's the word I would say? They are not clearly discussed, if I will use that word. Probably in premium ChatGPT. I've used it only a few occasions, but this normal ChatGPT. So my concern now is when I want to, I'm using it for research, especially when it comes to something research, something related to clinical trial. I'm like trying to build something of my own, and recently I've been using it to make some findings, but I've been feeling like it's biased. I've been feeling like it's biased, almost like does not have enough this thing on Africans. I don't like the solution I'm trying to build is around Africa. Sorry, I'm parabolating around. But my question now is there a way that we can probably engineer the prompt such that, or is it that it's already given, like maybe due to the data set they used to train the model? Do you think that's the question I'm going to? Do you think there's a way we can engineer the prompt such that it will give us a response, probably draw the response from another subset of data that is not generally available, or it's just maybe a bias due to the data set that they already have and no amount of engineering can over? So that's my question. I don't know if you get what I said.
Yeah, I mean that's a very amazing question. First off is to let you know that bias is not how do I put it now? Prompt engineering is not the solution for bias, right? Bias is not a problem of prompt engineering, right? These are two things that are mutually exclusive, right? So bias is a function of the data set that the LLM is being trained with, right? So there's no amount of prompt engineering that you do. You can, to some certain extent reduce it, but you cannot completely eliminate it. Again, you must also define what you mean by bias, because when you look at it generally, people also look at bias from different angles, right? And bias is, to some certain extent, some certain sets of bias, they are actually very, how do I put, subjective. Another thing is that what people actually refer to as bias doesn't necessarily means it is bias. You get it? I don't really know the context with which you are talking, but in a nutshell, right, prompt engineering is not a solution to bias. Bias is not a problem of prompt engineering. Bias is a function of what is being actually used to train the data. Now, within a prompt engineering space, what are some of the things that we do? So one of the things that we do is that we enhance the context of our LLM, right? For instance, as I said, you don't over, part of my last statement when I was talking about LLM is that you don't set unnecessary expectations for an LLM. Because when you set unnecessary expectations, then you become disappointed. Now, for instance, now I can't ask the LLM ChatGPT. I can't open ChatGPT and ask that what is the percentage of people who die of pneumonia in University of Ilorin Teaching Hospital. It's definitely not going to know that, but it will still give you an answer. It will tell you that, okay, based on recent studies, this. But some of this information are not being published. For instance, now I'm aware that a lot of clinical trials, people don't publish them. They don't publish the method. You understand? Like, it's usually a closed stuff that, okay, people just do. They write the whole methodology and procedure. They submit it to a body. The body approves it. They don't put those kind of information online. Same as banking. As some information that you want to know about banking, you will never get them because those information are not available online. But ChatGPT will not tell you that it doesn't know. ChatGPT will still bring related information, right? So for us within the engineering space, what we do is that we do what we call smart RAG, right? So RAG is retrieval augmented generation, meaning that you yourself, you would go and download, you go to Google, you download a couple of, folders or files or documents that you think that they are necessary for your ChatGPT to always reference. Then you do what we call smart RAG, right? So all of those things are going to convert into a vector database. Let's not go too much technical, but we make use of RAG such that when your ChatGPT or your LLM is thinking, it's also incorporating those, specific documents as part of its thought process, which are the documents that you most likely not necessarily see them on the mainstream, Google engine. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that are happening behind the curtains, but in a nutshell, bias is not a problem of prompt engineering. I hope that answers your question a bit.
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. My pleasure.
All right. So thank you so much. With this, we come to an end to this amazing presentation. The recording as well as the file used by Abdul Hamid is going to be shared in the course platform. So you just log in, go to where we have our events. You will see it under there. You will see the files. You will see the recording by tomorrow morning. So, and again, tomorrow we'll be hosting our data analytics mentors who will be talking about SQL, the Ask Me Anything section for SQL, Excel, for those who like Excel, Power BI, and Tableau. So they will be here with us just 1 hour. And then after that, on Saturday, we'll be talking about the AI and data careers in health tech and digital health. And that will wrap up our webinars for the AI DLC 2025. And then I have already announced in yesterday's meeting that we're extending the AI DLC time frame by 1 week. So instead of ending on the 21st, it will be 21st plus 1 week. This to help those who came in late so that they can finish their courses on Data Camp, come in to the platform at mitmedicsintech.com and then finish and propose their digital health solution. Thank you, everyone who joined, and we are sorry for the technical issues we experienced. And let's continue the conversation on WhatsApp and on all our social media platforms. So with this, we end today's meeting. Thank you. You're welcome. You're welcome. So see you guys.